back to that divergence then between information and money. Basically, in the 20th century, information way outpaces the speed of physical settled money. How does what is the role of the central bank in this? I mean, obviously the central bank predates the 20th century, but how does it emerge as a result of this divergence?
So the central bank was the coordinator, or still is the coordinator, to try to smooth this over. So going back to my prior point, even before the telegraph, there were these accelerating technologies that were gradually happening. Things like banknotes, things like printing press, and in the book I referenced William Stanley Jevons. He wrote a Money and the Mechanism of Exchange in 1875. And it's good timing because it's like about a decade after the cross-Atlantic telegraph cable came out. Mm-hmm. But even aside from that, he was talking about the increasing centralization that was happening. So he's like, okay, so if I want to pay you, it's really easy if we have a bank that I can just say, transfer from my account to your account. The problem is if we have a third friend and they have a different bank, we want to have those banks to be able to communicate with each other. And if you're in a region where there's 20 banks, are they all going to be like sending armored cars to each other to kind of settle at the end of every day or every week, or how's that going to work? Well, it's easy for them to all have an account at a central bank.
Yeah.
And then if you have cross-border payments, it's like, well, two central banks can kind of tie into a bigger central bank. So he actually had these layers, 4 layers deep, where he's kind of saying that the system's getting more and more centralized over time. And he had the foresight to say, one, this is incredibly efficient because all this fiat's moving over, whereas gold barely ever moves. But then he's also like, because it's so efficient, it's levered 20 to 1.
Yeah.
And if this ever gets improperly run, which it arguably already is, we've already seen signs of it, and this is him talking at the time, he's like, this could be catastrophic. And of course, we know around World War I, it all blew up.
Yeah.
And so basically, even before the telegraph, central banks were already consolidating power by being their kind of fundamental ledger. But then the telegraph kind of really put the ball in their court, and that's how they were able to kind of go from some countries had them to basically the whole world operating on this system.
Yes. So is this a fundamental trade-off? Like, because you do get so much efficiency gain with centralization, right? If we're just running the whole world on one node, one database for money, there's one global central bank that decides all of that. That's hyper efficient. Because they just need to update that one ledger and don't need anyone else's permission. Right?
And that was Jevons' point. He's like, basically, the entire system's run through London right now, because in his day it was.
Yes.
And he's like, that's both efficient, but also kind of horrifying. Yeah.
Because it's highly corruptible, right? That someone could get in charge of that thing and then bend the rules to disfavor everyone else and favor themselves.
If one central bank does things improperly, and that central bank, the Bank of England, did in World War One, they literally lied and cheated about how much money they were printing. They obfuscated, and they rug pulled not just their own citizens, as the global was occurring to the time they rug pulled. So there were countries around the world that were holding like sovereign reserves, and they got rug pulled too. But centralization is efficient, but then can efficiently wreck everything.
Yeah.
So all the efficiency in gains can be efficient to basically spreading a disease.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to think about because you get this like radical increase in, let's say, efficiency across space, right? You can coordinate things very fast, but it doesn't seem like it's very survivable over time.
Yeah.
Whereas a decentralized system kind of flips that. It's like, well, Bitcoin's a good example, right? It's slow and inefficient because all the nodes are checking one another's work, and it takes a while to update.
Yeah.
But that gives it persistence over time, even though it may be suffering in terms of transaction throughput through space. Is that a fundamental trade-off between decentralization being either anti-fragile or robust across time and centralized systems being highly efficient but fragile?
I think that's for the most part, but how much that matters really depends on technology. So, for example, before bandwidth and other factors got good enough for Bitcoin to exist. So Bitcoin existed almost as early as it could have, really. I mean, before then, the bandwidth globally was insufficient.
Yeah.
Types of encryption weren't there. So within a few years of those pieces coming together, Bitcoin existed. But before that time, there really was no other way to do it. And now is a time where Bitcoin is almost as efficient as Fedwire. Like, actually, Fedwire does about the same number of transactions per year as Bitcoin, which is like a crazy statistic.
Yeah.
And of course, that's it's technically more efficient. Like you could transfer more for cheaper, but it's not that much cheaper. And basically, you have like say way more robust system for something that's 90% as fast. And that I think is an overall better design. And of course, in the really early days, it had to be tested. I mean, it wasn't a better design in the first year or two because it was still this kind of, patchwork hobbyist type thing.
Yeah.
But as it's gone through the Lindy effect, as it's been around for 16 years, and as more and more eyes look at on, and as it kind of slowly like stabilizes, it's now an increasingly viable competitor Fed wire with most of the advantages, many of the advantage of its own, and very kind of limited downsides.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.